fellow Slivers across the multiverse, welcome back to your one and only trustworthy Hive. We've all been there before. No one is born an expert at anything, and Magic the Gathering is no exception. I've personally made some, if not all the mistakes on this list at one point or another. I think we all have. The important thing is learning from them and try to constantly improve at the game. If you consider yourself to be an advanced player, trying to reach the next level, I recommend you watch my last video instead. The top 8 winning habits of great MTG players. If you are a new player, the chances of you making any of the mistakes on this list is pretty high. So this video might help you correct or maybe even avoid many of them altogether. Without further ado, here are the 5 classic rookie mistakes in Magic the Gathering. Let us begin. Let's take a look at this hand and also let's get into the mindset of a new player. All I need to do is draw a couple more lands and I get to play my awesome spells. I can't mulligan this, all of these cards are so cool. If I start with anything other than 7 cards, that's not fun and I'm probably going to lose. As new players, we don't really like and we even fear mulligans, so we tend to avoid them at all costs unless our opening hands are literally only lands or only spells, and sometimes not even on those situations. Let's say you're playing Mono Green Tron in Modern. This deck wants to accomplish one thing and one thing only: to assemble the 3 different Ursa lands by turn 3 and cast one of its most of the time game-ending spells. This hand right here does not guarantee turn 3 Tron, so you must not start the game with it. This hand is also not a guaranteed turn 3 Tron, try again. The deck is exclusively designed to assemble all the Ursa lands and then play huge things, so keeping hands that don't really accomplish that goal will be nothing but counterproductive. And the same is true for most other decks, no matter the archetype or the format. Always ask yourself these questions. Does this hand really represent how my deck is supposed to work and what it is supposed to do? If I keep this hand and I don't draw a land or a creature during the first turns of the game, will I have a chance to win? If the answer to those questions is anything remotely resembling a no, you got a mulligan. You will win a lot more games with perfectly functional 6 or even 5 card hands than you ever will with do nothing, leave everything to chance 7 card hands. Yes, there is a lot of variance and luck in Magic the Gathering, but a good player will do everything possible to minimize that variance and turn luck into an ally, so don't fear mulligans. Once, at a Modern tournament, I took 4 mulligans and I kept the 5th hand because it was precisely all 3 of the Tron lands. Natural Tron, as the cool kids call it. First card I drew was Karn Liberated, which I got to play on turn 3 since my opponent got stuck on 1 land even though he kept a 7 card hand. That game was decided purely on the fact that, unlike my opponent, I refused to settle for anything other than what my deck was supposed to do, and it paid off. And I have a lot of similar anecdotes from different tournaments and different formats. So again, don't fear mulligans. They are part of the game. Learn to make them your allies too. I've named this paradox after the mistake I've made the most when I was a total Magic the Gathering rookie. Let me explain what I'm talking about. New players, especially the younger ones who are most likely still in school, tend to avoid spending hundreds of dollars in cards, which is completely logical and to be expected. I mean, let's be honest here, finding out that the cool card that you want is $50 or that the mana base of the cool deck you saw online is about $200 is quite overwhelming, if not downright heartbreaking. I remember when Thoughtseize was like a $5 card. Even though I was a complete rookie, I knew it was awesome and I knew I wanted to play it. But $20 for a playset was a bit too much for a broke-ass student. So what usually happens is that you start buying cheaper cards or even building complete decks that don't really accomplish what you want or need. So you get crushed at tournaments, but you still refuse to buy the playset of Thoughtseize or Uro or Sacred Foundry. So you keep spending on cheaper cards and decks, and you still get crushed. This cycle keeps repeating itself, and before you know it, you've spent an amount of money on bad cards and bad decks equal to the price of the cards and decks you wanted in the first place. That's what I call the cheap becomes expensive paradox. It happened to me, and I've seen it happen to a lot of new players over the years. We don't want to wait a few months or even weeks to save enough money for those $30 lands, so instead we spend $30 in a bunch of cards we think will be just as good. Only they aren't. And we spend another $30 on crap again. Because all we want is to play, and I get that. Like I said, this was the mistake I made the most as a beginner. And of course, after spending a small fortune on useless cards, I came to my senses and I ended up buying a playset of Thoughtseize and Fetches and Shocks anyway. So avoid this paradox at all costs. Trust me, on the long run, owning 4 copies of Thoughtseize and each Fetch land and each Shock land will prove to be a lot cheaper and more profitable than owning 400 copies of cards that supposedly do something similar, but in reality, they don't. Great cards will almost always be staples in multiple formats, and most of the bulk will always be bulk. This aspect of the game is incredibly deep and it connects with other concepts such as resource management, card advantage, threat assessment, etc. If you want me to discuss those things at length in another video, let me know in the comment section below. But in this video, I'll try to keep it simple for new players. Playing too aggressively or too conservatively has nothing to do with the type of deck you play and everything to do with the decisions you make. For example, new players who like to play control tend to kill or counter literally anything their opponents try to play. That's too aggressive, and they will probably be out of answers when the real threats start showing up later in the game. New players who like aggro always live in fear of having their precious creatures blown up and made food for worms. So sometimes they will have lethal on board, but they won't go for it because they fear a board wipe or a counter spell or something. That's playing too conservatively, and it will, most of the time, give your opponents the time they need to reverse the situation. Time they probably wouldn't have if you had just pressured them, thus forcing an answer anyway. So if you're a new player, always try to remember that not everything that dies to removal should die to removal, or that if your opponent has the board wipe or the counter or whatever, you should always try to force the answer yourself instead of giving them the time and space to use it at will. When we are complete rookies, we tend to either lack the patience and level-headedness to see if we can turn around an adverse situation, or we just don't have the experience to know that there is no card in our deck or a play we can make that will save us from certain situations.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
The only real antidote for this is playtesting a lot, getting to know how your deck and other decks work inside out. I've had a lot of new players in front of me concede the moment I played, I don't know, a Galta, even when they were at 20 life and far ahead on board. I had already seen what their decks were about throughout the game, so it was clear to me that one more freaking removal spell or direct damage spell would have been game over for me. When we are rookies, I guess we tend to freak out whenever we see splashy bombs like a Galta, and we think it's immediately game over. And I've also seen the complete opposite happen. New players who refuse to concede because they fail to understand that while they might still have a decent life total and some stuff on board, there are things that you just cannot escape from. Once I resolved a Sphinx's Revelation for 11 after a Teferi emblem, and my opponent continued playing. He was a new player obviously, so he didn't realize that even if he was at 20 life, there was no chance in hell he was going to win with one land in play, no hand, and in top decking mode against a Teferi emblem, and me starting my turn with 15 cards in hand, including another Teferi.
Stop! He's already dead!
When you are a new player and you start going to your local game store more often, you eventually recognize the best player or players in there. You know, The ones that win what it seems like 95% of all the events. And they always crush you. Every single time. Over and over again. Every time you have to face them, you lose. So eventually, you start thinking to yourself,
Oh no, not that player, not that deck.
not again! And so you go to the table thinking, well, I guess I'm going to lose against this person one more time. The thing is, if you let yourself fall into that state of mind before playing a game, then yes, you will most likely lose. We've already talked about variance and luck in this video. Even if you're a complete rookie, variance and luck can still be in your favor. Your opponents, no matter how experienced, can still suffer from getting mana screwed or mana flooded. So mulligan if you must. Try to play the cards you have as best as you can and picture yourself winning. No one becomes an expert overnight, we all know that. But also, no one stops being a rookie until they truly start believing they can be more than that. So never approach a game of Magic thinking you cannot win. You won't always win, and that's true even for the best players in the world. But you should definitely always believe that you can. In the words of Reed Duke, my favorite player of all time, you must have the confidence to trust yourself and believe that victory is possible. If you don't believe deep down that you can win, then you won't search your hardest for those subtle plays that define a great player. And those are the 5 classic rookie mistakes that you should avoid. If you like this video, please leave your thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Don't forget to share our content with other Slivers across the multiverse. That's the best way in which you can help the Hive. Do you consider yourself a new player, or are you on the way of becoming the next John Finkel? Are there any other classic rookie mistakes I forgot? Leave a comment below. In the meantime, take care, and we'll gather again on the next video.